Welcome aboard Rocket Ship, the platform with the most relevant content for competitive examinations. This is Rocket Ship IAS Lab and continuing with our series on answer writing for general studies papers of civil service main examination. We take up a question that you might come across in GS paper 2. Please read out the question carefully. Rights and responsibility go hand in hand. Nowhere this is more applicable than in relation to freedom of speech and expression. In the light of the foregoing, discuss the rationale for placing restrictions on freedom of speech and expression. Also, briefly mention issues arising from such restrictions. Again, this question is a quite straightforward one, in the sense that the question itself sets the theme of the, you could say, your entire answer. That is, it itself talks about that the restrictions on right of freedom and restrictions on the freedom of speech and expression justify this maxim that rights and responsibility go hand in hand. That is, the restrictions are there for some particular, or for that matter, justifiable reason. Then you have to talk about the reasoning for placing these restrictions on freedom of speech and expression. In the second part of the question, you have to talk about the issues that arise due to these restrictions. That is, the issues that would arise due to the freedom of expression and speech not being an absolute one. We are introducing our answer by making a, you could say, an observation, that is, freedom of speech and expression is a foundational right. Since this right, that is, without this right, we cannot even conceive of opinion free of fear, free flow of information, nor hold the rulers accountable. It is of such importance that the free press is built on its bedrock. That is, the free press directly takes from the idea of freedom of speech and expression. So the point is, this freedom, that is the freedom of speech and expression, is so important that it ensures that there is opinion, that you can tender your opinion free of fear, or for that matter there is free flow of information. Moreover, you can hold the powers that be, the rulers, accountable. All of these are very, very important for a functioning democracy. So you can understand that this very freedom of speech and expression is one of the, you could say, prerequisites for a functioning democracy. All this means freedom of speech and expression is a prerequisite for a vibrant functioning democracy. This was also the rationale behind enshrining this right under Part 3 on fundamental rights of our Constitution. Under Article 19(1)(a), most of you can recall that the freedom of speech and expression is listed under Article 19(1)(a) of the Constitution, Part 3. However, as pointed out by Dr. Ambedkar himself, the freedoms cannot be taken as unrestricted or absolute. These freedoms can be circumscribed, that is, the freedom of speech and expression can be circumscribed in the interest of security of the state, friendly relations with foreign states, public order, decency and morality, contempt of court, defamation, incitement of offense, and integrity and sovereignty of India. Please try to recall as many points on which this right can be restricted as is possible. However, we would suggest you that you do recall the most common of these restrictions, that is, for preventing contempt of court, for preventing defamation, for public order, morality, tranquility, etc., for maintaining friendly relations with a foreign power, for the security of the state, etc. The reasoning behind restricting the freedom of expression is a sound one. That is, the restrictions are quite justifiable. Rights of the many to tranquility, peace, and decency cannot be sacrificed to the opinion of a few or an individual. That is, we have to restrict the rights of the majority, rights of the greater number of people. To give an example, people objecting to public display of affection, that is often, you could say, connected with the idea of moral policy. It is often connected with the problem of moral policing. This carry much weight in opining that places of public resort like a park are different from one's private quarters. That is generally, this is the private quarter, that is the most, you could say, suitable place for displaying affection towards your romantic partner. And if someone is doing this in a public place, it's very likely that many people would object to it, and the objectors are actually justified here, because they have the expectation that someone's private affairs won't be displayed to them, because that is how the society functions. Society has certain idea of decency. Hate speech, denial of historical atrocities, etc., cannot be conceivably protected. They mostly intend to make mischief as part of political mobilization. So the point is, when someone is making a hate speech, or for that matter, he is denying historical atrocities, there is likely to be some political motive behind it. He is probably trying to achieve some political mileage. That is why shutting down internet or telecom networks during a riot is justified. That it would mean that the conflagration would not, you could say, spread out. That is, the problem won't spread, the riot won't spread. In the landmark, coming to a judgment of the Supreme Court of India, in the landmark Subramaniam Swamy versus Union of India, the Honorable Supreme Court held that reputation is an integral aspect of dignity, protected as an adjunct to right to life. That is, people's dignity, an individual's dignity, it's you could say, an inalienable part of his right to life. It's adjunct to right to life under Article 21. So you can understand this justified restrictions on Article 19(1)(a) in case of defamation. That is, defamation is not protected under one's freedom of speech and expression, because someone's reputation is a matter of his dignity, which is, you could say, an inalienable part, which is an inseparable part of right to life under Article 21. Then freedom of opinion cannot be allowed to interfere with administration of justice, or becoming a tool to browbeat judiciary. That is, maybe if you want the judiciary to do your bidding, and in that matter, at least your freedom of speech and expression can be restricted, so that you do not indulge in contempt of the court. But these restrictions give rise to pertinent questions and issues. What are some of these questions and issues? There's fear that the restrictions would lead to chilling effect, as dissenters will become too circumspect or too cautious of criticizing the powers that be. This would stifle dissent and promote blind press. Try to understand it from a more recent example. There was this case that a particular comedian, or like for that matter many comedians, were being hounded out for making some, you could say, not so tasteful jokes. Most of them are not funny, in my opinion. Most of these what is that called, stand-up comedians are not funny. However, the point is, they do have this freedom of opinion, and they do sometimes make important points that may not be to the, you could say, best liking of the powers that be. And if this becomes a trend, which we sadly see it becoming, if the comedian, or for that matter any person, is being hounded out just for making tasteless jokes on those in power, what it would mean that people would become too cautious of even criticizing the powers that be for something that is quite relevant. That would lead to a stifling of dissent, and ultimately it would promote a blind press. That is, the press itself would start to be making attempt to be in the good book of the powers that be. That you can understand very very well. That won't be the best day for our democracy. Some criteria for restricting the freedoms like friendly relations with a foreign state are vague and morally dubious. Try to understand it from a more recent example, that some of India's, you could say, friends, some of the countries which most Indians consider their friends, have been, you could say, accused of undertaking unjustified aggression their neighbors. And just because of friendly relations with those countries, if we are not going to criticize them, that raises moral question. Moreover, this entire term, that is the term friendly relation, is not well defined. You may consider them a friend of India, other people may not consider them a friend of India. So this raises a very very important point, that something that has you could say moral, that is morally doubtful, can be used to justify restriction on a freedom, on a fundamental freedom. Moreover, legal scholars have argued for decriminalizing defamation and making it a civil offense. Actually, this is a point that many legal scholars, many jurists have said that defamation should be like made a civil offense. That is, someone should be made to pay some form of penalty rather than making a punishable offense, that is punishable with jail terms, etc. And while it, you can understand also also understand that it is a, you could say, personal grievance, it has due to with the, you could say, individual dignity, it may be an overkill to restrict a fundamental freedom, something that is essentially in the nature of a personal grievance, a grievance between two people. And if you are, you could say, restricting the fundamental rights for this something personal grievance, that is certainly, that is disproportionate, that is a disproportionate action. So what we suggest, that we have to apply these restrictions carefully and sparingly, that is not you could say without giving thought. Moreover, public persons, this is again our argument, that public persons should also cultivate tolerance for criticism and eschew flattery. That is generally, if we would advise the powers that be, that they should actually like not always encourage flattery or sycophancy, rather than they should always cultivate this habit of listening to the, you could say, opposing voices. That would be, you could say, strengthen India's democracy, and in fact that would also serve them well, because sometimes they might be making a wrong step, and the people who are their opponents or their critics, they can actually stop them from making this mistake. So this is how we end our answer for today. We would bring you another lecture in a few days. As usual, we wish you all the best. Thank you.